garbage dump gone horribly wrong. Hello again. Thank you for being here with me once more. I hope you are very well today. I am Marie. Hello, welcome to my channel. This information can be seen as science fiction, or as the viewer sees best, and I post it for entertainment purposes only. Still, I take my information very seriously, and for whoever has eyes to see. I am writing this on the morning of September the 24th and 25th, 2024. Taygetan starships processes their garbage and all their refuse disposal through a complex system that first classifies it according to the different materials, removing all the metals, and then all the other recyclable materials. Whatever the artificial intelligence decides that can be reused, it is set aside as it goes through a moving belt inside the machine. Although the crew supposedly already decided what they want and what they do not as they threw something away, this system is to prevent mistakes from happening. For example, when a set of keys is sent to the disposal by mistake. When the garbage is fully classified, the unwanted part is sent to a machine that first scans the molecular vibration of the materials and then sends high-energy waves of the opposite ones, disintegrating it at a molecular level. This disintegration liberates a lot of heat, which is then converted into electricity by a series of thermoelectrical receptors which do most of the job. The excess heat which those did not convert into electricity is absorbed by the liquid cooling systems of the ship, which moves the hot fluid to the ship's engineering spaces, where it mixes with other coolant fluids from different systems, and is finally converted into more electricity that is discharged into the main ship-wide grid to help run the ship. Very much contrary to how life in space is depicted in Hollywood movies, the problem is not the extreme cold of space, it is the heat build-up in all the systems of the ship. As in a vacuum, there is no effective way to dissipate it, as it can be done on Earth with a simple water radiator and a fan. Therefore, it must be converted into another type of energy, electricity. Cold temperature is characterized by low molecular movement, and absolute zero, as it is called on Earth, is when all the molecular activity of any object has stopped. Absolute zero is the lowest temperature possible, and it's defined as 0 Kelvin, which is minus 273.15 degrees Celsius or minus 459.67 degrees Fahrenheit. This is where the idea of space being a cold place comes from, but in reality, empirically space holds no temperature, so a thermometer placed outside a starship will only register its own initial temperature, as it cannot lose it. It cannot radiate it, as in space. It is effectively as if it were inside a giant thermos jar. As I said above, heat build-up is the real problem all starships face in space. The space anecdote for today. Several years ago, and before Queen Alanim came to power, Taygeteanos had a very strong presence here in low Earth orbit as they were very cooperative with the Galactic Federation, much as the Alphaton Centauri are today. Back then there was no Taygetan king or queen, but there was a strong leader with controversial ideas, which were very much synchronized with the interests of the Federation, and therefore with the cabal that controls Earth, but that is another story. There were as many as 20 Taygetan large starships around Earth back then, all fulfilling roles and missions which are tasked to the Alphaton Centauri nowadays. One of those starships, and the one which was the Taygetan fleet's flagship, was Toleka, the same ship most of you know. This incident happened during the infamous Project First Contact, so countless Taygeteanos were talking to people on Earth, and had various degrees of friendship and familiarity with them. The leader of the Taygetan fleet at that time, whose name I'd rather not say, but most of you listening to me right now already know who I am talking about, was also talking to her group of friends on Earth. While they were chatting with her friends online, typing, of course, she was interrupted by her communications officers on board the ship, to inform her that one of the older ships tasked with escorting Toleka was asking for instructions because she was experiencing difficulties with her garbage processing systems. The systems had stopped working about a month before that time, and the crew of that older ship, which was closely escorting Toleka, had resorted to storing their garbage until their processor could be repaired by their maintenance crew. The problem was that by that time, their garbage had accumulated so much that they did not know what to do with it, as their refuse processor was not yet repaired and was completely inoperative. Therefore they had to inform the, at the time, Taygetan local leader, asking for instructions on what to do with their garbage problem. The Taygetan local leader shared the problem with her friends on Earth, those with which she was talking to, at the time, and one of them said, "Why don't they simply throw it out the window?" As their conversation continued, they thought that solution was silly funny, and were joking about it, discussing what would happen if they actually did so, and they were saying that it would be a medieval solution and so on, when the communications officers on Starship Toleka's bridge came online over the intercommunicator once more, telling the Taygetan leader that the ship with the garbage problem was still waiting for instructions. So the Taygetan leader, joking, answered back and said, "Tell them to simply throw it out the window, it is that simple." And she continued laughing with her friends online. The communications officer, who was not in with the joke, took the leader's instructions literally. It was a strange solution, but perhaps it was logical, so she relayed the message to the captain of the ship with the failing garbage processor. That ship's captain received the order to dump their garbage out the window. He thought it was a strange solution, but he consulted this order with one of his lead engineers on board, and they both came to the conclusion that the garbage would simply burn up in the Earth's atmosphere, as it fell. So they thought there wouldn't be any problem, nor any consequences to dumping the garbage out into space, even though they had accumulated almost 4 tons of it, much less as they were sick of having it on board, taking up a lot of space inside, and probably stinking all the place, and everything else in the process. So they proceeded to put it on top of movable platforms, using a loader, and then they moved it into one of their airlocks, and finally shot it out into space. Of course, they had to do this several times as 4 tons of garbage do not fit in the airlock at once. And then they proceeded to inform the Taygetan leader, over on Starship Toleka, that the dump had taken place, and that her orders had been fulfilled. The Taygetan leader was very surprised, and screamed, "No, that was just a joke," but it was too late. This was a terrible mistake, as the crew was instructed to take the word of their leaders literally, and they also had no reason to believe it was a joke. The problem is that, although the garbage was to fall to Earth and burn up as it entered its atmosphere, never reaching the surface, it did not fall immediately. The garbage that was shot out of the airlock was also moving at orbital speeds, close to 7.5 kilometers a second, therefore it did not fall immediately, and although eventually, it would fall to Earth with no consequences, it would take several days if not weeks or even months, before doing so. As the garbage was shot out of the airlock, it dispersed all over the orbital altitude, forming a debris cloud, which was also moving at speed, although progressively slowing down with time. During that same orbit, the starships had no problem, but 90 minutes later, the orbiting starships caught up with the garbage cloud from behind and crashed against it. Although the garbage cloud was also moving almost at the same speed as the orbiting starships, it was starting to slow down. The starships always have energy shields around them, therefore the garbage did not impact directly against their hulls or windshields, but the crew on their bridges could see all the garbage incoming and impacting against the frontal shields. It was described as countless flashes of light, as medium to small particles and garbage articles were vaporized and incinerated by the ship's shields. Yet, larger objects glowed from electric blue to yellow, orange and red as they were diverted from the starship's path, spinning away in all directions. What is worse, the garbage debris cloud tended to follow or stick to the energy shields. This is a physics reaction where all smaller objects in a free-moving environment will tend to clump together, especially against the largest object available. Therefore, the garbage cloud followed the starships around their orbits for several days, where the crew's view out the window was full of garbage, and instead of appreciating a nice view of space and of Earth below, what they could see was a recollection of broken containers, spent packages, torn underwear, and banana peelings. Although as the days passed by, most of the garbage started to lose orbital speed and finally fell to Earth to be incinerated during its entry, a substantial amount of it stuck to the energy shields, following the starships around like a swarm of flies following a stinky pig. As it looked like that garbage cloud of flies wasn't diminishing after several days, the crew of both starships, heavy cruiser Toleka and its escorting destroyer, decided to move to a higher orbit to shed the garbage debris field that was following them. As they moved to another 100 kilometers higher orbit using what is called an engine burn, using its plasma jet turbines, most of the garbage debris field still followed them, so they had to do several more engine burns to leave behind as much of the flies that were following the Taygetan piggy wiggies. As far as I understand, the correct way to shed a debris cloud following your starship is not to do an engine burn, rather you must jump to a nearby location by hyperspace. That way the ship stops existing in the middle of the garbage debris field and reappears far from it, therefore shedding its flies effectively. The problem in this case is that you are not allowed to jump into hyperspace so near a planet, much less Earth, as it is a very high transit zone, as part of space traffic control regulations of the Galactic Federation, and they are perfectly logical, I must add. As the rule goes, you are not allowed to jump into hyperspace nor exit it near a planet if your starship exceeds something in the vicinity of 3,000 metric tons in its total weight, ship and cargo, translating from stellar measurements of course. This regulation leaves smaller vessels such as fighter craft and shuttles to jump in and out of hyperspace almost freely, although precautions still must be taken to avoid a collision. In the case of Earth, all larger starships must exit hyperspace as much as 500,000 kilometers away, and then slow down using their plasma jet turbines in reverse thrust, and approach Earth and its assigned orbit at a very slow impulse speed, coasting, and only using engine burns to course correct. This is for the safety of all the other large starships stationed in orbit, as maneuvering large ships among others is inherently hazardous, even with their shields on all the time. As I described in a recent video, the Starship Asterope, which is a lot larger than 300 metric tons, did jump into hyperspace while in low Earth orbit, although this was a violation of space protocol concerning the handling of large starships near a planet. It was necessary. As it was an incident against the Federation's minions, we weren't exactly thinking about behaving correctly at that time, yet the local Galactic Federation did not mention nor did they complain against us for doing so, perhaps because they recognized that it was their Alfreton patrol craft who were out of line during that incident. During the garbage dump event, we can see how many things went wrong or did not work, as the chain of communication among the Taygeteanos did not work well. At the time, Taygetan leader was joking with her friends, and therefore assumed that other people who were not in with the joke would take it as such, because they did not see the humor in throwing the garbage out the window, as was said. They did not take it as a joke even though the wording was different, as the Taygetan leader said that they should throw it out the window, which is strictly speaking impossible in space, as windows do not open here. If it would be a serious order, the wording would have been to throw it out the airlock, and it was not said that way. The cause of this event was a simple misunderstanding which brought very stinky and bothersome consequences. And even though the Taygetan language is verbal telepathic, which means that each spoken word is also telepathically loaded with further more complete meaning, it is never enough to convey all the message correctly. Telepathy is very useful, yet it must also be transmitted correctly and clearly, as the spoken word is as well, or else the telepathic message is only as good as how well it was worded, for lack of a better word, although I would make up another for telepathy, like in the message was not correctly brained. Telepathy is very useful for conveying large bulks of information to another person in a short time, but it is not perfect, so the common idea on Earth that there cannot ever be any misunderstandings among fully telepathic people is simply wrong. Using telepathy simply adds another layer to the message, and therefore it also adds more complexity, and more complexity means more potential for misunderstanding. Using telepathy and spoken words for communication can cause even more confusion if the subjects are not paying attention to one another, yet if done correctly it can be very accurate. Telepathic messages can be twisted, modified, and even falsified, so it all boils down to who is using it, and his or her personal ethics. But this is a subject for another video. Going back to the garbage which eventually fell to Earth, the sad thing is that from the surface, countless people among the human population saw it as it entered the atmosphere, but interpreted it as a simple meteorite shower. I don't know if this is funny or not, but by simple logic, many people even asked for a wish when they saw one of those shooting stars in the night sky, and thought of it as a very romantic scene, when in reality they were asking for a wish from someone's old discarded underwear, burning up as it entered Earth's atmosphere. I have at least one report from the surface that indicates that at that time and in the correct location on the surface, people reported a large object falling from the sky, presumably a meteorite, which even created a large sonic boom as it finally broke up near the surface. As far as my data goes, it was most probably a discarded dishwasher falling to Earth, as it is one of the few items which the crew remembers throwing out of the airlock with the rest of the garbage at that time. As Yazhi Sophia pointed out, not everything that fell to Earth broke up as it entered the atmosphere, as it depends on the mass and the hardness of each item. For example, a discarded stainless steel spanner would most probably reach the surface at a very high speed, and with a lot of impact energy, becoming a very dangerous missile. As a note, Lyrian human waste from the bathrooms is processed by another system. What I learned from this incident is that as a leader, I must be very careful with how I word things and with what I say in general, as I may be taken a little too seriously. I have noticed this for myself recently, as it looks like people around me already see me as their queen, and that is a great responsibility I alone must shoulder. This will be all for today. As always, thank you for watching my video, and for liking, sharing, and subscribing for more. It helps this channel grow a lot. And I hope to see you here next time. With much love and appreciation, your friend. Marie swore.